And yet what happened to over at least fighting men, we'll say fighting men, men of valor. What happened to 603, I had to look, so I'm not doing this from memory, but 603, 548 of those men that were numbered at the beginning of Numbers chapter 1. They all crossed over through the Red Sea, but what happened to them? How many of those entered into the land of Canaan? 603,550. A little higher. Just a tad higher. You had 603,550. How many of those entered into the land of Canaan? Not counting the men that were counted as men, 20 years and older, men of fighting at Numbers chapter 1. 2. What were the names? Caleb and Joshua. So all these individuals had crossed through the Red Sea. They were into the promised land, and yet just talking about those individuals, not talking about others. 603,548 perished in the wilderness. They did not reach the promised land. So why did Paul tell the Corinthian brethren to be careful to take heed lest they fall? Because what? These might not happen, they won't happen the same way that it happened to the Israelites. Fiery serpents aren't going to come out and bite you, and you're going to be able to look at a bronze serpent. You're not going to be swallowed whole by a hole generated by the Lord. But what can happen to Christians? We can fall and we can be lost. It's very clear. Because if this is the case, Paul again is writing to Christians. If a Christian cannot fall, then what does it matter about what we do? Why do we have to be careful? Because we can fall, notwithstanding what is taught in the world. Number 11, the cup of blessing Paul mentioned is the blank of the blood of Christ. And I hit the communion of the blood of Christ. And this is going to be coming up a little bit more later in the chapter when he's discussing with regard to the offering of sacrifices. Question number 12. Why did Paul reject the Gentiles' sacrifices? This does not include Christian Gentiles. Because they were sacrificing to demons and to devils. They were sacrificing to whom? If they were in Corinth at this time, they were sacrificing to what gods? They weren't Christians. Or if had been Christian, they were Christian. They may have been doing this. Many of them were probably doing this before they became Christians. The Greek gods, of course, they probably had the Roman names by now, but Zeus, Hera, Aphrodite, Apollo, Hermes, so on. Take the planets and substitute the various Roman names. But this is who they were sacrificing. They were sacrificing people they thought were gods, but what did Paul say they were actually sacrificing? To demons, to devils. They were not sacrificing to God. They were not sacrificing to true God. And if you really think about it, and I was thinking about it today, if you think about some of those Roman gods, those Greek gods, those gods were presented in what type of image? Those who may remember their Greek mythology, enjoying it, reading it, how would you describe those gods? What would be a good way to probably describe them? What did you say, Bruce? Giants, that's one, possibly, yeah. I think a great way to make you think about them was they were human beings with with powers and a lot bigger problems because of those powers. And a lot of them probably were just as bad as the demons and devils that could be mentioned. And so if you read some of the things, Zeus was a philanderer, Jupiter's a philanderer. If you were the unfortunate woman who Zeus found his designs on, Herod disliked her and something would happen, see Hercules and his mother and various things. And there was weird relations and just terrible things. But they were religious, were they not? Paul later in Acts chapter 17 said, what about the Athenians? They were what? When he went to Athens, you are too, the term we say in the King James Version is superstitious, but that is religious. There were a number of religious people. But just because they were religious does not make them right, does it? There's a lot of religious people in the world today, correct? Maybe some who are maybe more religious than we should be, and yet they're worshiping the false gods. They're following the wrong doctrine. So Paul could not accept the Gentile sacrifice. Why? Because it wasn't right, because they were worshiping the wrong thing. They were worshiping the devils and the demons. And of course, in James chapter 2, thou believest there is one God, thou doest well, the devils also believe and tremble. Was when James wrote that, was that to be some sort of acknowledgement of the goodness of the devils and the demons? No, it wasn't. And we go back to the gospel accounts. Jesus didn't want to hear his name proclaimed by the devils and the demons, did he? He would forbid them from saying that. So that's not a compliment. They were worshiping the devils and demons. That's not a good thing. Okay, I think this is where I sort of messed up. I know I did. I know I did. Sort of got this mixed up. Question 13. For what should a Christian look when he is tempted? A way to escape. That's correct. A way to escape, to bear the temptation. Let's turn to chapter 10, verse 13. We'll go back to verse 12. Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. So go to James chapter 1. God does not do what? God does not tempt us. So when we run into trials and tribulations, we should not blame God. But yet we do run into trials and temptations. And so how are we to deal with those? We go back to the book of Job. Was that a terrible thing? Lost all his possessions. He lost all his servants. He lost all his children. Then on the second go around, he was struck down with a physical disability that was so bad. Today I've never had a boil. I've heard things. My mom has said something about how that was. And it's very painful, but from everything, references I see on TV or in the things, very painful. Painful. And yet, Job didn't have one boil, did he? He was covered head to toe. It's terrible. And yet, the one thing he would not do is what? Curse God. Now, he had a lot of questions. He had some friends that weren't very good friends, and this and that. But God had told Satan, you can do these things. Can't take his life, but you can do these things. And yet Job was able ultimately to withstand it. And today it says here, what again? No temptation has overtaken you except such that is common to man. So we go through life and we think something happens to us, and what do we think? Woe is me. This is the worst thing. Nobody will understand. And chances are what? Everybody will understand. And chances are there's people who have had a lot of things worse. And yet we do know what? There are times when things do happen to us that can cause us, if we're not careful, to do what? Fall away. Turn away from God. The family, the mother and the father who lose the child, they were out and they got hit by a drunk driver. Do they turn to God for comfort, or do they shake their fists at them? The person whose house is consumed in fire and they lose everything. And then some medical emergency comes. What do? Do they turn to God, or do they shake their fist? According to this, Paul says that God will not allow us to bear anything that we can't bear. But we have to work at that, do we not? It's easy to say that, is it not? Yes, Sister Linda.
But he also gives us a state to get themselves harmed.
That's right. Yeah. And so temptation can come in bad things like that, but it can also come, and for the Corinthians here, what would have probably been, what was the temptation? Paul's going to talk a little more about it, but what was the temptation they were facing? Yes, I've been using the temptations, the trials and the temptations of bad things that happen to us, but there are other things that can cause us to be tempted. The things of the world, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, those things. And here they were in a city. If you know about Corinth, it's been mentioned, Byron mentioned it. Corinth was not the Sound of Music with the Von Trapp kids, I guess. I'm trying to think of something. So I was going to say Salt Lake City, but I'm not going to be careful there. But it was not a family-friendly place, was it? And these individuals, these men and women coming, if they were pagans and they were Gentiles, again, chances are they had engaged in this type of idolatry. They had worshiped these gods. And here they are, and now they are going to have to deal with it as Christians. Just as we have to deal with things today that are bad influences on our lives. We just look around and we know these things. Television's easy or internet's easy to say, but it's just out there. Language is different, is it not? Please note, profanity didn't come around in the last 20, 30 years. It's always been around. But you watch shows from the 60s? Did you hear profanity on TV? No. Did you hear certain things? No. Today, your child's teacher may be using it. You may actually find something you're reading something you weren't expecting, some slang to be used, and I would have said that person shouldn't use that slang since that person's supposed to be a Christian. That's a true story. Something I've been reading recently. I saw some slang used that I was not really impressed with being used. But that's beside the point, I guess. But those are things we face. And so, even though these temptations are around us, we can't use that as an excuse to sin and fall, can we? But God says here, Paul says here, that there is a way to escape. And so, Just to go to verse 14 really quickly, what does he say? Flee from idolatry. Now, if you're living in Corinth, and there's temples here and temples there, and you still got to stay in Corinth, that's hard to do, isn't it? Sometimes it's easy to say, well, so-and-so needs to move out of that neighborhood. Sometimes people, that's a tough neighborhood, maybe. It's easier said than done, is it not? For people. Sometimes it's hard to physically leave, and so what you have to try to do is spiritually leave it and to ignore it. And one of the places you can do is you can turn to God in prayer, you can turn to His Word, you can turn to your brothers and sisters in Christ. But God gives us a way of escape. And Christians need to realize that. And we need to use that. It'll be bad on the day of judgment when we say this occurred, and God said, well, here is a way you could have done something here. You could have done that. Sister Kirky.
I heard somebody say one time, if you're living in a bad neighborhood or a difficult neighborhood, evangelize.
That's right.
Evangelize your neighbors. And so you convert them to Christianity, and one by one, you improve your neighborhood.
That's a good point there. That's a good way to escape, is it not? One other thing is if you don't necessarily, they'll know who you are better. And people, and if they know you better, that can help out. And even today in this atheistic, humanistic world sometimes that we seem to live in, there are people that still have a problem in dealing with people with the church, with the Christians, and trying to offend them. If they know that's the type of person they are. They will go out of their way. They might go and be cussing with the other neighbors, but they won't do it around you, and this and that. So that's a good thing there. Evangelize. Assemble together, study. Take heed to what Paul is teaching here. Some good things here. So, way of escape. Christians cannot drink the cup of blank and the cup of the Lord and demons. Verse 21. Verse 20, rather than the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Now, this is more than just talking about partaking of the Lord's Supper, is it not? It's talking about our daily walk of life. The life that we live, the way that we act, the things that we do. But as it's been said, we can't live like a saint on the first day of the week and live like the devil the other 6 days of the week. And we've got to be careful there, because when we're trying to do both, what are we going to run in, what are we doing? Well, there's a lot of passages we could go. That could be called some sort of spiritual bigamy. Paul referenced that in Romans. Of course, that was the law of Moses and the law of Christ. But in a sense, the law of the devil, you might say, or the lawlessness of the devil, you're trying to keep that. But what does he say here? Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Going back to what occurred in the first part of the chapter, the examples. What had they done to the Lord? What have those Israelites done when they engaged in sin with the Moabitess women? Sexual immorality. What had they done? They provoked the Lord. When they murmured about the food and the drink, what did they do? They provoked the Lord. That's why these fiery serpents were sent. Korah and Dathan and Abiram think we can do just as well as Moses and Aaron. We should be the ones leading, even not the ones that God chose. What are they doing? Provoking. And then when you complain about after the things that have occurred, and again, I still think, this is just me, those are some of the most stupid people in the history of the world. I'm sorry. You caused Korah to be swamped in a big hole. I want to badmouth. That's not very smart. They complain. Well, what? God wanted to strike them down, did he not? And if Moses and Aaron said, you know what, let's take we need a break from this, Aaron. Let's go pick some flowers or see if we can find some sheep or something to gaze and look at the beauty of nature out here or whatever. The Israelites would have been dead, would they not? They provoked. Now today, does God strike us down? He could, if he wanted to. And we do have an example, do we not, of Ananias and Sapphira. But when we look at the New Testament, God doesn't do that, does he? When there are men and women teaching false error, what does God want people to do, for example? He wants those who are righteous to stand up against it, to teach against it, to condemn it, to correct it. Those are the things he wants done. But he could strike people down, could he not? Like I said, he could, but he doesn't. But no, but in a way, it's even worse, though, is it not? Because you're doing something and that's causing God to be upset. The Israelites could not say that they didn't know God was upset, could they? Had been upset with them. They saw it. They know it. Today, what happens? Like I said, he doesn't strike people down. He doesn't cause the pulpit to open up and the preacher to be swallowed into it. But yet is he upset when sin's taught? Is he upset when people teach the wrong thing, when people worship the wrong way, when people assume to be on an equal level as God and the Son? I know he's upset. And we're provoking him. And yet, when are we? If we don't correct to do that which is right, when are we going to find out that we were provoking him to jealousy? Unfortunately, if we don't follow the word, we're going to find out when it's too late. We're going to find out when it's too late. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and the table of demons. 15. And I just clicked it, I'm going to click it back. Paul spoke of things which were lawful, but which were not blank, and which did not, which were not expedient, and which did not edify. And he's already mentioned this, has he not? Chapter 8, talking about the meats. There are things, and so we won't say a lot about this. There are things that we can do that are lawful. But as we said earlier in the study of this book, may not be expedient. May not be the best thing to do. And Paul even says here, does not edify. What does it mean to edify? To build up, to encourage, to try to strengthen. And so we think we're going to do this, and it may be right. It may be nothing necessarily wrong with it, in a sense, but it may not be the best thing to do. Paul, but going back to chapter 8, did Paul have a problem with eating meats that had been offered to an idol? Depends on who he was with, and he says some things. But in general, if Paul had eaten a hamburger and they said, we offered this to Zeus after that, would Paul have jumped up and started trying to get, I need some castor oil or something, something. What induces vomiting around here, Poison control. No, that's not how Paul would have reacted. Because he knows what? It's meat, and it's just there. But, as Drew says, it depends who he's eating with. If it's a person who is weak in the faith, well, let's use the Corinthians, they were Jews. Let's say Paul was a Jew, but he might not have had a problem eating a good pork barbecue sandwich. Or some bacon. Not turkey bacon, bacon from a hog. He may have enjoyed a good sausage biscuit. Again, not turkey sausage, sausage from a hog. And yet he goes over to Peter. Peter may still have a problem. Peter had been told in Acts chapter 10 about don't call things unclean that God has cleansed. Peter's a Jew, he may have had problems with that, or some other Jew may have had problems eating that. And so it may not be wise to do that. Funny story, we're in the process of trying to do a new system in our company, ERP, and it's a headache, big project. We're in phase 2, and I'm not really involved in what mine is until phase 3, which is thankful because I'd probably go crazy. But there's a gentleman on there that's dealing with our little retail stores. He's been working on that. And I found out, I knew he was from probably India, somewhere. I found out last week, someone said he had gone on a pilgrimage over to Mecca, I believe it was. Mecca or maybe Medina, but it was one of those. First of all, I didn't realize he was Muslim, if that was the case. He might not be, but they said pilgrimage. That's the first thing that popped in my mind. But it made me think, if I was trying to, I'd met the guy once, but if I was trying to engage in some conversation with him, and maybe try to talk to him, would it really be wise then if this man if I understood that he was a practicing Muslim, to then say, by the way, let me go get my 3 barbecue pork sandwiches and we'll talk? That's maybe not the wisest thing to do, is it? Now, is anything unlawful about that? But is it expedient? Is it wise if you're trying to do something? So sometimes you've got to use that. Even error can be corrected, and the Bible gives certain times when error should be corrected, but sometimes it may not be wise to do it one way. Paul confronted Peter, did he not, when they were in Antioch? But if somebody else may have been that, what Paul might have done is another way, might he? Now, someone could say, Paul was an apostle. He could go out there and tell you don't. But for that person, it may not have been the wisest thing to do. But for Peter, it was the thing to do. Why? Because Peter was one of the 12. Peter was looked upon, and he was causing others to fall. Again, there may be ways to do something that are lawful. Someone says, you're correct and you're right, but the way you're doing it may not be the most expedient thing to do. Might not be the best way to do. Might not be the way to edify a fellow brother and sister. So, again, we talked enough about this, I think, concerning what we talked about before. But just because something may be right doesn't mean it is the thing to do. Is it expedient? Is it something that leads to edification? Okay. Number 16, wait a minute. More devil. There it is, expedient to edify, okay. Okay. If expedient, edify, verse 23. What command did Paul give regarding eating and drinking? Do all to the glory of God. So he's going to give a little bit more. Okay, that's fine. I was going to talk about this. Don't have a lot of time, but. So let's go back to verse 27. I actually think, Sister Cook, the answer you gave is what I gave as well, but I appreciate what Byron says here because I think it's important. So verse 27, if any of those who do not believe invites you to dinner and you desire to go eat whatever is set before you, ask no question for conscience sake. Today many people want to know what's in their food. Was it raised free range or raised in a barn, in a shed, layer? How was it? Does it eat? What kind of foods does it eat? Is it medical? Is it GMO, non-GMO? Do they take antibiotics? What sort of antibiotics? Purdue, a number of years talked about the fact they didn't use those things as part of their commercial. I'm in a business where you hear this all the time. People want to know, was it made in the United States? Was it made by the local person here? Did it come from Brazil, Australia, this and that? People want to know these things. But Paul, talking to these Corinthians, he knows that there's probably going to be times that they're going to have meals, eat with those who are not believers, to try to convince them to come to Christ, to try to teach them. And so they're going to come here and something is going to be put on their plate. Nothing said, they just put on the plate. What should the Christian do, the Corinthian Christian do? What should they not do? What is it? Actually, I think Paul would allow, depends on what it looks like. What is that? No. What should the Christian not do? Brings it out, puts the meat. Did this get offered to an idol? Did you get this from somebody that offered it to an idol? What God was this offered to? If they bring the meat to you, don't say anything, put it down. What do? Bless it and eat it. Bless it and eat it. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of one who told you and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's in all its fullness. So they bring out and say, I got a deal today. This was offered to Zeus, or this was offered to Diana, to Venus, whoever. And they sat in the market. I got it. You'll enjoy it. What then should you do? Don't eat it. Say, I'm sorry, I can't eat it. Because why? For the conscience sake. For your conscience sake, but also for what? For the person who's offering it to you. I can't take that. It was offered an idol. It violates what I've been taught, what I've learned. It violates my conscience. If you dig in, it might send the wrong message, may it not? Now, is Paul here saying that ignorance is bliss, especially when eating meals? That's not what he's saying, though. But what he's saying is, meat, he said this earlier, meat, is it not? And if somebody brings out something, even an unbeliever, there's no need to go digging into that, stirring up trouble just to stir up this. you know that meat is not any good, is not different because it was offered to a god. There's not some kind of taste test where you go to the butcher's market and say, this one of these steaks was offered to a god, the other one wasn't. Which one was it? They're both, if they're done cooked the same way, they're both going to taste the same, aren't they, Brother Julius? Oh, this is the one that was the Greek god. No. But if you know it, first of all, that might violate your conscience. But you also have you may be offering this opportunity. Listen, I can't partake of that because it was offered to an idol. It's just not. I know it now, and I can't partake of it. Because again, verse 31, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, all to the glory of God. And one of the best ways here to go glory to God is to stand up and show, hey, this has been offered to an idol, and I can't take it. Again, we're not supposed to go, they weren't supposed to go digging about it. Can I see the receipt where you got this? Things like that. But if it came up, they were not to eat and rejected. Okay, we'll stop here. When this class picks up in 2 weeks, on this particular lesson, I'll let Byron can go do whatever he wants to go back and cover whatever. 16 is where we stop, though. Of course, next week, it's the last Wednesday of the month. That's hard to believe. The end of June is not as, we're over halfway of the month already. So next week is Chronological Bible Month. If you got questions for what we read for the for the month, if you'll get them to me sooner so I can have time to look. If not, I'll do my best to answer I'll ask questions up there. It's been some interesting things read this month, have we not? If I had to ask a question right now, what's the most interesting thing you've read so far this month? What's the most interesting thing you read from the Chronological Bible this month? I put you on the spot, didn't I? Maybe that's what I'll do next week as well, so keep that in mind. For me, it's the first 2 or 3 chapters of 1 Kings. Because I just think, I did not realize the Godfather had his origins in the transfer from David to Solomon. Thank you so much. Give us a minute or two, and we'll have our devotional.